Perfect. Hi everyone, it's Isaac Savage from NZ Fighter. Today I have Richie Hardcore. We're going to discuss the journey, the topic of modern day masculinity, and how we evolve in today's modern day society through kickboxing and also through sport. Now, with me today, I've got an activist, a public speaker, and multiple New Zealand kickboxing champ, Richie Hardcore. Welcome today, Richie.
Hey man, thanks for taking the time to talk with me. I appreciate it.
Now, look, I'm going to ask, before we get into what you do now, I just want to go right back to the beginning here in New Zealand of how you got started in kickboxing and martial arts.
Yeah, word. Well, I started like freestyle taekwondo at Limbs United Taekwondo when I was 13 years old. So it was 27 years ago. Just my father took me up to the local community hall up in Kelston out in West Auckland, and I've told this story a couple of times, but my father's a chronic alcoholic, suffered from depression his whole life, and he was in a good space then, and he took me up and he said to the instructor, "I'm not doing a very good job as a dad. Can you help out my son?" And that's where it all really began. I'd walk up there every Monday and Wednesday and do freestyle taekwondo under an instructor called Greg Deha. And it was the first thing I ever really loved, and it was the first thing I was ever really good at or applied myself to, and just kept going, really. Yeah, I started Muay Thai when I was 17 at Balmoral League Art. There's an older guy at high school who was like, "Oh, do you do Taekwondo? You should come do Muay Thai. That's the real shit." And I was just about to get my black belt, and I thought I knew what was up when it came to combat sports. And then I went to Balmoral, and I was like, "Oh, yo, this is the real deal." Yeah, I liked the contact of it compared to the semi-contact. I'd had about 20 semi-contact sort of point sparring tournaments, and I thought it was pretty tough. And then I went to Thai boxing, and I was like, "Yo, these dudes would crush me in a real life combat experience." And then made the switch. I was doing Taekwondo a couple nights a week, Thai boxing a couple of nights a week and Saturdays, and then I just decided to go all in on Thai boxing from about 18 years old.
So we talk about that switch, and a lot of people get started off in martial arts that way. They started in, Taekwondo, karate, whatever it may be, even judo. So going from Taekwondo to Muay Thai, how soon did you actually start jumping in the ring after that?
I was 18 when I had my first Thai boxing fight. Yeah, I was still in high school. I was training at Balmoral most of the time, but then I was good friends with a guy called Willie Lamb, and he was training at Strikeforce Gym. And I didn't really think about it. I didn't think about the respect element of it. And I'd go train there sometimes. And then Aaron Boys at Strikeforce like, "Hey, do you want to have a fight? There's a fight coming up this weekend." So I actually had a fight. My first fight, a friend from Balmoral was in the corner, but I fought out of Strikeforce Gym because he'd organized it all. Because I was competing against like some of the Strikeforce boys and stuff in these freestyle tournaments. And then, Lolo was grumpy at me, understandably. But it's all good. It was all learning, and me and Lolo are real close, to this day. But so after about a year of Thai boxing, I had my first Thai boxing fight. But I guess all the Taekwondo experience and freestyle tournaments had, I guess, prepared me to some degree.
And leading up to that, when did you actually go for your first strap or that title here in New Zealand?
My first title fight was, I think it was. I'm looking at the trophy right now in my study, and I'm like, when was that? I think that was maybe 2002 or 2003. I'd gone to train on John Conway. John Conway was like my big brother. We both come from Balmoral, and John really took me under his wing, and he lived closer to where I live out in West Auckland, and he got me running in the mornings, like 6 a.m. every day, and he kind of really built me up, and was like, "Oh, what do you want to do with Thai boxing?" And I said, "Oh, I want to be New Zealand champion," when I was like 19, 20, 21. And he really honed me. He taught me a work ethic of 6 a.m. starts, 6 p.m. back in the gym. And I moved from training at Balmoral, although we would still go out there and spar with the Balmoral team Tuesdays and Thursdays, to representing Rebel Liga. You know, it's John the Rebel Conway, and he had his own offshoot of the Liga family. And yeah, my first title fight for him, I think maybe 2002 or 2003. Yeah, maybe. And then yeah, I stuck with him for 10 more years.
How did it
And
feel? How did it feel
yeah,
though, winning that first strap? I mean, there's so John Conway, legend of a man. You go to his gym, it's like a museum, right? I mean, he's got pictures there of
yeah,
Ray Sefo, and
yeah, bro.
it's a cool spot to be. How did it feel though, going back to you know, starting off at 14, then doing it until 2021, then at that age getting your first strap? Did it feel awesome? Like, what was going through your mind when you were going up to that title fight, and then when you got it?
Man, it felt like everything. When I look back now, like it felt like more of a big deal than it actually was. But for me, as a kid who didn't really think it'd amount to much or anything, it was everything. Yeah, it really was one of the most rewarding experiences to this day. And life's been pretty interesting. I've had a pretty interesting, well, for me, it feels like it's been pretty interesting. But it continues to be like a real central memory in my development as a person, you know, like and that first New Zealand title was the basis for all these other growth experiences, not just in Muay Thai and Thai boxing, but in my development as a person, you know. But I think it was a real, I'm not a naturally confident person, and to win like a national title against a good guy, I guess let me know that I can be something. Do you know what I mean? And now I'm a coach, like, and I train young fighters, and I've worked with some of our top pro guys. I guess I love sharing all the experiences of development, not just in the sport, but in, you know, our internal journeys with whoever comes through the gym, you know. So yeah, you know, how did that experience of winning that first title feel? It felt amazing. And I guess it let me know that you can sort of overcome where you come from. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
100%. I mean, it's interesting too how you say, you just mentioned that you're not a hugely confident person, but you're a keynote speaker. Every time I've seen you run a class, I actually enjoy it for the skills, but also your energy. You know,
Oh,
you're
thanks.
such a good mentor motivator, and that it's quite interesting to hear you say that, because do you think kickboxing and winning those titles has given you that confidence, or is that something you've learned and developed from
Yeah.
winning title
Uh,
championship fights?
yeah, massively, man. Like my slogan for my little gym is Team Hardcore is fighting saved my life, and it's because it did. Like it made me like a martial arts gave me a pathway to be successful in life, and it did give me that confidence, you know. And my journey isn't by any means not unique, you know. Like there is a good body of academic research now that will tell you that participation in well-structured martial arts programs, whether it's judo, karate, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, mixed martial arts, Muay Thai, is good for the development of young people. And my own journey in that is anecdotal, but yeah, it's what allowed me to learn how to be disciplined and be structured and turn up kind of on time. I'm not very punctual, but turn up. I would always turn up, even if I was late. And all those are transferable life skills, bro. You know, like whether that's to go to university or go to a job or whatever it is. For me, it was martial arts that taught me that stuff. Muay Thai in particular, and the hard rate training that went around that.
We,
So
you
yeah,
know, we see it all the
yeah.
time, and one thing I wanted to ask you was, when you go into those fights, this weekend it was the UFC was on, and there was an interview between Korean Zombie and his opponent Brian Ortega, and he had a real interesting point about, you know, when he's getting his gloves wrapped, he's thinking, what am I doing here? You know, why am I even doing this?
Yeah,
And
bro.
did you ever have those thoughts? Because you've
Oh,
had
bro,
so many
every time.
fights. Were you just like
Yeah.
shit scared? Like, what am I doing?
Yeah, man. I mean, by today's standards, I didn't have that many fights. You know, I had about 20 Taekwondo fights. I had 40 Thai boxing fights. And, but pretty much every time I was like, what the fuck is this going on? Like, why am I here? Could be just chilling out, you know? And I think that's what, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I'm not scared. And maybe they're not, but they're probably nervous or they're a bit anxious. And these are all normal responses to the stress of fighting, you know? we feel some sort of something. But for me, yeah, I definitely would be nervous and second guessing myself. But in spite of that, I'd always go fight, you know, and I think that's what makes you grow as a person. You know, is those feelings of self-doubt or those questions about why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this? And going and putting yourself through that fire every time anyway. And for me, like most of the time I'd come out successful, you know, in spite of, in spite of that chatter in your head. And every time you do that, it makes you a bigger person, you know, like your circle of what's possible for me is like this. And then it gets like this, and then it gets like this, and it gets like this.
Yeah.
And there's other ways of doing that growth and that development, but for me, martial arts and the forge of combat like is one of the best ones, you know.
And that's sort of a segue into the next question of, you know, when you were training back then, you obviously 6 a.m. runs. You're so healthy now in a sense with your diet and, you know, what you put into your body. Back then, though, what was it like? Were you drinking? Were you smoking? Were you training? Were you mixing it all together, or what were you doing?
Nah, man, because of my dad's alcoholism, I always had like a real like funny relationship with alcohol. I was kind of like, this is kind of fucked. I didn't like it, you know. And I grew up with a heap of people. All my friends were heavy drinkers, drug users. Um, you know, when you grow up in a certain environment, you often recreate that environment in your personal life, and that's what I did. You know, I surrounded myself with real party people. And as I moved into adulthood, a lot of my friends sort of like, you know, there was some criminality on the fringes of my social circle, and you know, people were going down the wrong path. But they're the people that I felt energetically connected to, you know, whether they were, you know, mucking around with gangs or they were musicians who had drug problems or whatever. They were extreme people, and they're the people that I kind of felt most at home with. And but for me, like with all that around me, I chose not to do drugs and alcohol. Like I experimented with those things. You know, I drank infrequently. I'm talking like a handful of times a year up until I was 27. But most people thought I was sober anyway because I was so infrequent with my drinking. Um, and so I think a lot of people, given the way I look and the stuff I talk about publicly these days, are like, oh, he used to be an addict or he used to be an alcoholic or whatever. But I never had my own problems with substance use. Um, but, you know, given my family history, not just my father, but my extended whakapapa back, you know, in addiction and all this running through my family lines, I did have that predisposition. And I'm lucky to have met people like Lolo and John Conway and other role models and influential people in my life through the sport of, you know, Thai boxing that steered me in the right direction. You know, I channeled all my feelings into something really structured and something really positive and cathartic and transformational, when I could have transferred all that energy into drugs, alcohol, crime, self-harming behaviors. And I'm grateful for that always to this day. Yeah.
Well, they say perception is reality, and you touched on a good point. You know, you've got the tats. At times, you probably would look intimidated, but then when people get to know you, they're quite surprised.
Oh yeah, all the time. Like, I think it's one of the things that bums me out about like social media is that people judge you on your appearance, or they judge you on a snippet of information they know about you. But people often, people judge me all the time, and I'm not alone in that. People judge everyone all the time. You know, we live in a snap judgment culture, and social media is part and parcel of exacerbating that and making that worse. But I think some people might hear me come like speak at a presentation or hear me in a professional setting, and they're like, "Oh, you're educated," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, you shouldn't be judgmental, you know." And I think that's one of the shames about the preconceptions that come with being involved in combat sports, is that we're all idiots or we're all violent people and yada yada yada, and that's so far from the truth. You know, you go to any gym, everyone's treated equal. Doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or you're a gang member or whatever. You know, everyone's equal in the ring or on the gym floor, and I wish there were more spaces in life like that.
Oh yeah, I loved it when you're on the breakfast show of Duncan Garner, etc. And what I loved about it is that you're on there, you're real, you've got your tats out, uh, and what you're doing right then and there in that moment is smashing stereotypes, just like you said, because people are going to be like, "Oh, who's this guy? How's he going to talk?" And then when you talk on TV, it just comes across so eloquent, and it will smash those stereotypes across New Zealand. That's a great thing to do.
Thank you, man. Yeah, and I'm not alone in that. There are a lot of wonderful people from combat sports, like Mike Angove and stuff, who've had a history of combat and are really articulate in public spaces. And I love seeing emerging voices like that. You know, like Kai Kara France has just started doing some public speaking in schools and motivational speaking. And because I'm a bit older than this new generation who are globally famous, you know, like yeah, I'm happy to perhaps be a forebearer of what I think is going to be bigger and bigger platforms of guys like Kai and Israel and Brad Riddell who are using their you know their global stardom to break down those preconceived notions of what a fighter is, you know. But yeah, I'm happy in my own small way to perhaps be a forebearer in that.
And saying that too, you know, after amassing all the straps and gold titles you did in New Zealand, at what point did you say, oh, there's more to this? I want to motivate people. I want to do this. Or did it just naturally happen by doing events here and there?
Yeah, it kind of happened organically. A lot of people are like, oh, how'd you get your personal brand? Or, you know, Richie Hardcore is good branding. But man, I just changed my name when I was 26 because I thought it was funny. You know, like it wasn't like a thing.
Yeah.
You know? And it's a weird one because a lot of fucking people don't get the whole hardcore thing. You know, it was my ring name, you know, like that was even for me.
Mm.
Like I recreated myself from the scared fucking insecure kid to, you know, I won all these titles and I won 4-man titles and got to fight overseas and all this shit that's hard, you know? And I didn't come from like the easiest of childhoods and I didn't come from being confident like I said. And so I sort of changed my name reflexively almost. And hardcore is also like this whole underground music scene that I was part and parcel of growing up and continue to be involved in. And there's all these like beige motherfuckers on the sidelines who don't understand all of that, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it did evolve organically. I think I gave my first talk in 2014, and it was on the concept of being a rebel. And for me, being a rebel isn't partying and drinking and drugs and going with the flow. It's doing what's difficult and standing up for what you believe in and going against what culture teaches us is acceptable, whether that's sexism or racism or mindless substance use and consumption. And people really vibed with my message. And it just sort of grew from that. People started being like, oh, hey, would you come and speak at this event? And then a good friend of mine who's far more business savvy than me was like, how much are you charging these people? And I'm like, oh, nothing. And she's like, idiot.
Yeah.
There's a whole business in public speaking and education where she built me a website. My friend Miriam, shout out Miriam Roberts, appreciate you always. And she really encouraged me to formalize what I do. And that kind of grew to the point where I got an agent and then I got another agent. And while I'm far from being Tony Robbins or Gary Vee or anything, like I pay the bills through public speaking and as much as running my little gym, you know? And yeah, I'm still learning. I still make mistakes. I still get nervous. I fucked up my TEDx talk, which is a constant thorn in my side. But when I'm in my flow state and I'm being me and I'm talking from the heart and my heart allows me to deliver the information um, that I have through academic understandings, professional understandings, then I'm really really good at engaging an audience and helping them to shift their behaviors and understanding sometimes. And I'm stoked on doing that. Yeah, it makes me
I,
really stoked to talk to young people in particular.
Well, I was gonna touch on it as well because I've seen you speak a few times, and obviously with the classes and training as well. And is that what drives you forward now? Is like as motivating others, seeing the change that you can create here, not only in New Zealand, the rest of the world. Is that what drives you forward now?
Yeah, man, for sure. Like I don't know about you, man, but growing up's hard, right? Like just existing is hard. Like the first truth of Buddhism is that we're all going to suffer, and no one talked to me and no one talked to my generation about a lot of the stuff that myself and a lot of the people I work with talk about. No one talked to us about mental health or how to deal with a breakup or what a healthy relationship is or what are the negative impacts of pornography or any of this shit, addiction, substance abuse. We had to figure it out the hard way by making mistakes, by fucking up our relationships, by getting divorced, by going to jail, by whatever. And I read all these things and I have all these conversations and I'm reasonably good at distilling them into a message that's a narrative that you can follow. And I'm stoked to go to a school. I went and spoke at school on Friday. These kids had committed suicide based on a whole bunch of bullying they'd been through, and Friday was Pink Shirt Day, anti-bullying day, and they asked me to come and speak for 45 minutes. So I did. Man, like, I was walking up the street, kids would come up to me and were like, "Hey man, you came to my school on Friday. It was amazing." Kids would send me messages on Instagram like, "Oh, thank you so much. You said everything that no one ever talks about." Like, that makes my day. The fact that I get paid a little bit of money for it sometimes is just a bonus. I mean, obviously, if you're watching this and you're a huge corporation, you have a budget, please hire me. But speaking to kids, like, it's dope, and that's the most rewarding thing. Because I know what it's like to not feel good. I know what it's like to want to kill myself. I know what it's like to be depressed. I know what it's like to feel lost. And if me in a good space can help a young person get some hope or understand that everything's going to be okay eventually, fuck man, I'm stoked on that. That's worth getting out of bed for every day.
I think too, it comes from the authenticity of who you are, and people really look up to people that have been there, done it, in a way, not just from reading books. And I think that fighting background really motivates others. And now that you speak on both parts, it's just inspirational.
Oh, thank you, Isaac. Yeah, man. Like I've gone to my eyes, right, and talked about like pornography or stuff or stopping family violence. And there's all these gangsters in the back, all patched up and stuff, and they're staunch as. And I'm like, yeah, respect, brothers. Like mean that you're here. And if I hadn't been the fighter, then they're not going to listen to me. I remember I went and spoke at Korero once, maximum security prison. I walked in, and the basic talk was don't let your past decide what your future is going to be, right? And I walk in and some of the boys there were like, "Oh, yo, man, seen you fighting, G." And I was like, "All right, like, do you want to fight me or what's that mean?" Like, and it just, but all it did is it gave me a little bit of a head start in opening up and having those conversations, and I leverage off that to talk to all people, boys and girls, men and women, but particularly harder to reach audiences about shit that they need to know. It's no good just talking to like feminists and academics and fucking people who already understand these things. You need to bring everyone into these conversations. And that's why I get frustrated is that the internet continually is tribal, and it's like you have to believe this or this. You're a good person or you're a bad person. It's black or it's white. And it's not like that. We need everyone to have these difficult conversations around mental health and violence prevention and substance abuse and yada yada yada, not just like the privileged few. And I guess I try and bridge some of those gaps. And it's tricky because people want to put you in a box, but I do it regardless. Yeah.
You talked about Kaikara, Shane Young. Now, recently Shane Young talked about his mental health issues and suicide depression in New Zealand. Now, what are your thoughts on young men talking about this so publicly, and why do you think we struggle to talk about these things as Kiwi men?
We struggle to talk about it as Kiwi men, and indeed men globally, largely in part because we have a social construction that the idea of being a man is being tough and being stoic and not being vulnerable and not being emotional and using our fists to solve problems and not backing down from a difficult situation, right? Like there are all these things from childhood onwards that predispose us to guarding our emotions and putting strong walls up. When you think about the stories that our families tell us and the jokes we see on Facebook and about don't be a soft cock and boys don't cry, like we hear that from day dot, and so when we grow up in this culture that teaches men that being a good man and being socially acceptable is being all of these things, well, we are going to lock our feelings inside ourselves, you know? So someone like Shane to go on television and be like, yo, I've struggled from depression. I've struggled with my mental health is shifting that culture. It's shifting that cultural conversation and letting people know that, hey, you can be muscular, you can be a professional athlete, you can be good at a really hard, stereotypically masculine sport, and at the same time, struggle with all these things and be vulnerable and open. It doesn't make you soft or lesser than other men by opening yourself up to those conversations. And in fact, what we want is that all people to understand that masculinity has nothing to do with all these old-fashioned, outdated norms. It can be whatever you want it to be. You know, you're not worth anything less if you're not into sports. You know, if you're not into tattoos and fast cars and all that shit. Which I personally am, you know, but like, does it, you know, like I've bought into a lot of those cultural ideas, you know, like what made me sort of popular for a minute when I was at school, when I became a young man, was leaning into, oh, yo, people treat me differently when I look like this and when I act like this, you know. The fact that I get to have these conversations is because I used to be tough, you know, like I used to kick motherfuckers in the face all day, and like that allowed me, you know. So I'm mindful that I'm deconstructing this culture that I continue to be part of.
That you're you're still part of, and like you said back when you were fighting, you were following that that path of, you know, what a real man is or perceived as in New Zealand. It's going to be a pretty hard cultural shift to change in a sense, even though we are just touching on the cusp of it now. But we are seeing guys like yourself, Shane Young, other men talk about it. But it's such, like you said, stoic nature that New Zealand men struggle, because, like, you're right, drinking beer, tattoos, going pig hunting, not talking about your feelings and seem tough. Have you seen the movie Savage?
Oh yeah, amazing! What a film. I think they did a really good job of capturing. You know, in my work, I've met a lot of men who've been sexually abused, and that's a narrative in that film. And those men internalize all that pain, and they internalize all that shame, and then it percolates away, and they hurt all the people around them. You know, like we need to hold people who hurt others accountable, but at the same time, we also need to help them heal. You know, if we really want people to stop committing violence against women and children, we need to help the men who perpetrate that violence heal. And prison isn't always the best place for that, because prison is a melting pot of a whole bunch of people who are traumatized. You know, most people in prison have got an undiagnosed mental health issue. They've got substance abuse problems, and they go into a prison where they have to put on all this masculine shit that you and I are talking about now. You got to be tough to survive. It's survival of the fittest. And that's a real shame. Now, I'm not saying that people who do hurtful things and hurt others shouldn't have a repercussion, or they shouldn't even go to prison, but we need to transform what happens within prisons. Because right now, people, it's just a fucking revolving door of like damaged people hurting other people, going to prison with other damaged people, come back up, repeat cycle a lot of the time, right? So Savage did a really good job of capturing that in a way that I think allows people to have an insight, you know. And when you have an emotional response to something like that, it allows you to potentially take actions that might lead to change.
You know, it's interesting you touched on that, because my father works in a similar line of work you do in terms of rehabilitation, integrating people back into society. And I take my hat off to him and you, given the success rate, because you talk about that repeat culture or cycle, given the success rate, or maybe small percentage success rate, is that what drives you forward in that sense? Because so many will relapse and go back to it. How do you get to people to push through and just break outside of that cusp of breaking free of, you know, cultural behaviors in such a long-winded sort of cycle of trauma?
So sorry. So with your question, are you asking me like how do you help someone in that situation, or what gives me hope to keep doing what I'm doing?
Bit of both. So given the success rate, which
Being
is
low.
relatively small, very low.
Yeah.
Is it that 1 or 2, 10% that make it through that give you hope and push forward?
Yeah, man. Yeah, for real. Yeah, it is. You know, like imagine if no one was in this space. And I'm just one person, and there are heaps of, like, hundreds of thousands of people out there doing good work, probation officers or parole officers, and they're good. Believe it or not, like, there are good police officers out there who do good things to help people shift their lives. If those people weren't there, it's not going to be 10%. It's going to be 1% of people, breaking out of the cycles that they may have been born into. So I continue to talk about what I talk about and work with the people that I work with in and out of the gym, because someone has to, like, I believe in redemption. I believe in the fact that hurt people. And if I want there to be less violence, if I want less children growing up scared and abused, if I want less women being raped or assaulted by their partners, then it's like my duty to talk about what I know. I've worked really hard to deal with my own issues, and I'm in a really good space most of the time because my mental health fluctuates like everyone's mental health. And I want to use what I got as long as people want to listen to me. You know what I mean? Like, eventually they won't give a fuck about me, and someone else younger will do it, and I'll move into a different space, and that's great. And I think that's how it should go. It's like being a coach, man. Like, you learn all this shit fighting, and then you turn around and you help the next generation. Or it's the same with being an activist, an educator, a change maker. You've walked this journey. What are you going to do with the information that you've amassed? You're going to keep it to yourself and be selfish, or you're going to share it?
The thing is too, and say like business or personal goals, some people say, well, when I achieve this, I'll be happy. But for you, it almost seems like the job is never ending. You could keep doing this until the day you die.
Yeah, man, 100%. Like, you're right, Isaac. We have like an end goal focus in our society. I'll be happy when I have a new car. I'll be happy when I win the next title. I'll be happy when I have a prettier girlfriend. I'll be happy I win, blah, blah, blah. Right? And but the fact of the matter is, if you're only waiting on outcomes, you're not going to be happy for the majority of your life. And you actually have to learn to enjoy the process and the journey, and the outcome is just the cherry on top. It's the icing. Every time you fight, right? If you're only going to be stoked if you win, you're setting yourself up for a whole lot of suffering and disappointment, because you're not going to win 100 of your fights, unless of course you're Israel Adesanya. But but that's a silly outlook, because that whole training camp, 8 weeks of hard work, is making you not just a better athlete and a better combat, not better and just better at combat. It's making you a better person. You're learning more about your craft. You're learning more about yourself and what you're capable of and how you can extend yourself and what works for you and what doesn't. And if we apply that to business, if we apply that to our relationships, then we have a growth mindset. Like, every time you break up with someone that you love, it really, really hurts. It hurts so much, and you'll suffer and you'll cry. But if you analyze your relationship and you analyze yourself and your own role in that, you'll get bigger and you'll know more about yourself, and you'll be better at communicating and compromising and caring and listening for your next relationship. Like, the journey is where all the good stuff is and where the growth is. The outcome is just, like I said, like, it's a cherry on top.
Being such an empathetic, supportive person and dealing with all the people you do, you must be inundated with emails, calls, texts. How do you deal with all that?
Not that well sometimes. I get a bit overwhelmed. Actually, right now I'm sitting about a girl who messaged me, some woman I don't know. It was like, oh, I'm getting abused by my partner. What do I do? Can you send me an email? And I've got to do that when I get off, now that I've talked to you about it. It does get a bit much, because our services are opaque. People don't know how to look at the system and where exactly to get help. And to be honest, our services are really underfunded and really understaffed. And you can go and ask for help, but it's like a 6-week, 8-week waiting list. Like, if you're a chronic addict, for example, if you're a chronic alcoholic in Auckland, there are about 10 publicly funded beds if you need like a medical detox, and the waiting list is really fucking long. So if you turn up to get help and they're like, come back in 2 months, keep drinking until you do get here, because you might go into a seizure and die, do you think you're going to go back anytime soon? So those sort of people message people like me. And like I said, there are a million people like me. Perhaps not a million, but there's the Jazz Thorntons, and there's the Jimmy Hunts, and there's the Rob Mokarakas, and the Vic Tamatis, and all the other brothers and sisters out there trying to help. And we have to deal with a lot of what the state should be dealing with. And that's cool because we are our brothers and sisters keepers, but it's a lot, man. And when I'm in a good space, I'm cool with that, you know, like I am a strong, resilient person. But sometimes it's hard, bro, you know? And like when you put yourself out there publicly, you get haters and you get trolls, man. I've had a real fucking rough go of that shit. And it sucks. And sometimes that's what makes you want to quit. It's not the overwhelm of, you know, strangers every day sending you heavy messages asking for help, support, and guidance. It's the haters who are deliberately misrepresenting you or deliberately trying to undermine you or bring up your past mistakes. Like they're perfect. That really fucking gets to you.
It's so crazy how there'd be, I know there's haters in all types, especially when you do put yourself out there, but it's so bizarre to see someone, or you talk about a troll or a hater for you when you're spreading positive message. Now, have you ever ran into any of these keyboard warriors in real life?
Fuck, I
Or
actually
invited them to
have,
the
bro.
gym?
I've seen that. Fuck, Simon Bridges, the leader of the opposition National Party, was like dragging me for political purposes once. True story. And I saw him at an event and I hit him up. I was like, I walked up to him and I was like, hey man, I don't appreciate what you're saying about me in the public space and you're ruining my name. Are you familiar with what I do for work? Like I work with some of the hardest to reach people and you're potentially damaging my ability to do that. Like why are you doing that? And he kind of started along and didn't have much to say about it. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like
I think too,
people,
people will be tough behind the screen, but then when you confront,
ah,
a lot of people don't like confrontation. That's why they
most
maybe
people
even
don't
jump
like
in the ring.
confrontation. Yeah, most people don't like confrontation. And that's the problem with the internet is that it gives people who are internally weak and internally damaged, internally lost, a false sense of validation and power, and they're getting attention. And there is a dopagenic reward pathway that comes from that, right? Like every time you like get a like or a retweet or a share on social media, your brain gives you a reward chemical, like when you're drinking coffee or like when you're having sex. And it's a small amount of it, but you get a lot of it and it becomes really addictive, right? And we live in like an attention seeking society because of that, you know, like we live in an attention economy, and when you have lots of attention you can feel really good. And even if that attention is bad attention or that attention comes from hurting other people, well, we have like whole industries based on that now. Blogging, the way mainstream media is moving to be more and more like social media. It's all about clicks, it's all about views, it's not about facts, it's not about truth, it's about attention. And that continues to give these people platforms. And whether it's politicians or it's random fucking trolls, like
I love
everyone
it how
buys
you,
into it.
I love how you hit up Simon Bridges and the random big fella. Now we talk about the
And all peace to
desensitization.
the big fella. Like if the big fella's watching this, all peace, bro. Like we shook hands and that's cool, you know? Like it's not about holding grudges. It's just about like, yo, man, like if people being deliberately hurtful, like they deserve to be held to account. And that's the thing. Like I have a conversation with anyone in person if they wanted to, but most of these people aren't capable of it because they haven't done the work to build themselves up on the inside. So they hide behind screens and talk mad shit.
So it sounds like you've built up hopefully you're building up a resilience. You know, they talk about LeBron James not looking at the comments on Twitter and Facebook and all that carry on. Do you take it with a grain of salt now when someone is talking shit? Just
No,
be like,
man,
oh, this guy.
it still gets to me, man. Like I am I'm a person, just like anyone. You know, like fuck Israel Adesanya gets haters, you know, and people always like use that image of that like the one time he got knocked out as some sort of oh you're useless. It's like it's always some person who's never done anything with their life, and
Mm.
it upsets me, man. Like seeing other people get trolled. You know, like it's a global phenomena. You know, I'm just but one person who experiences this stuff. But for me, it still upsets me, and I'm working on that. I'm working to separate my work from who I am, my political and ideological beliefs from who I am, because those things aren't one and the same, right? And it can feel when you are your work that when people attack your work, they attack you. So I'm trying my best to separate those things. And when some random person who, if I'm being compassionate, is probably really hurt and probably really lost and probably looking for attention and validation in all the wrong places. But when they throw things at you, it does hurt. But I'm trying my best to be like, yo, hurt people, hurt people. Why is this person doing this? It's not a reflection of me, it's a reflection of them. And while I'm not going to sit back and let people, you know, depending on the extent of it, I'm not going to get walked all over. I'm not going to engage in it, and I'm not going to try and like yeah, I'm not going to try. I try really hard to not get caught up in it. Just last night, some random fucking psycho was saying this horrible shit about me, and then you look at their account and you're like, oh, it's not just me. You do this to anyone who's
Yeah,
got
could be
some
some
degree of
dude
could
living
be
in his
anyone.
basement,
Yeah,
eating
and that's where I have trouble about.
Doritos.
That's yeah, but that's the thing though, bro. Like I said at the start of the conversation, young people are committing suicide based on trolling and internet bullying.
100%.
Charlotte Dawson committed suicide based on trolling and internet bullying. You know, and we need to shift our culture. If you're out there watching this, don't just turn a blind eye to that stuff. If you see someone perpetrating it, call them out on it. Like, call them in on it. Hey, why are you doing that? What do you get out of that? Do you realize that there's a human being with feelings and a fucking heartbeat behind their screen? You know, and if you're one of like 100 people, 1,000 people, or 10,000 people piling on, you might be the straw that breaks the camel's back and might make that person hurt themselves. Do you know what I mean?
Well, 100% too. And sometimes when you do confront people, you maybe open them up to what they're feeling and hurting. There's a meme of a guy with an angry face and it's got layers, and the next face is a crying face. And next one's a kid crying in the corner, and I'm sure you've seen it. And it's exactly what you're talking about now.
Bro, 100%. I got this bro comes to my gym, and he's been inside, been in prison, all this shit. And we have mean conversations, and it comes down to the fact that inside him is a little wounded kid who no one looked after properly, emotionally, mentally, physically, right? And he's been to prison, and he's like, bro, all those big tough gangsters, a lot of them are really hurt and really wounded on the inside, and all that violence and all those tattoos and all those muscles and all that fucking screw face, like what can't. That is the armor that they have put on top of themselves to be able to make their way through life and not just fall apart all the time, right? And that's the same with internet trolls. And I don't know, man. Like, I guess we need to help hurt people heal so they don't continue to hurt people, whether that's physically or digitally.
Do you think too? It's quite a big question, but the internet, like we we're talking about, creates trolls, but it also opens up the world to talking about open feelings and how we cope with this and that. Are we in a better place? But say we go back into the 80s, there was no internet. People just didn't know, weren't socially connecting. Or go to now where we're talking about these things, we're talking about depression, mental health, suicide. We can, connect with others. Are we in a better place for the internet and opening the ideas, opposed to going back in time to the 80s?
It's twofold. Like, I think it's Dave Chappelle, one of my favorite comedians, is like, remember in the 90s where you could move 2 blocks and start your whole life again? Like, like, I think, and it's like, it is twofold because yes, the internet and the knowledge that we can share through that is hugely beneficial. It opens us up to conversations around mental health, depression, all the things we've been talking about today, in a positive way. But it's also negative in that, if you look at the research of, say, social psychologists like Jonathan Haidt, there's a trackable rise in depression and anxiety that correlates with the rise in the use of social media, particularly for young people, young women in particular, but young men too. We need to be mindful that the internet, like any tool, can be used for good or it can be used for bad, and that we need to be mindful of how much we're using it, because we do get psychological rewards when we jump online, and we do get an emotional numbing sensation when we are online a lot of the time, and it can distract us from our internal affect, how we're feeling, even if we're not aware we're feeling that. We need to be mindful that we can use the internet and social media the same way that we use drugs or porn or sex or overeating. Do you know what I mean? It can take us away from our inner distress, and that's not a good thing, because when we don't pay attention to what we're feeling, we react rather than make considered decisions. Do you know what I mean? If we really want to develop knowledge of ourselves, we need to pay attention to what's going on inside of ourselves, right? And when we pay attention to what's going on outside of ourselves, when we figure out why certain situations, why certain people make us act a certain way, or why we gravitate towards the same shit, then we can start learning and unlearning. It's like watching the fight tape, bro. You're like, oh, fuck, my footwork's a bit wrong. And that's why I get caught with the jab all the time, right? And often it takes a mistake or a loss in order to do that. But often we have a mistake, we have a loss in our personal lives or professional lives outside of the fight game. And we're like, well, I'm not going to pay attention to why that mistake happened. I'm just going to scroll away. I'm just going to party more. I'm just going to drink more. I'm just going to fuck around some more. And then I don't have to pay attention to all that noise. So yeah, the internet's sick. Like, I love it. Like, it's literally taken me all over the world. I've literally had the most amazing experiences, tours through America, tours through Australia, meeting like super famous musicians, like getting fucking work. Like my speaking business grew off the back of like a few selfies in front of a crowd, like, oh, I talked to 1,000 kids today. And then other people were like, would you come talk to our 1,000 kids? It's amazing. And I've made like real friends in all parts of the world, like dudes in Los Angeles, people in Chile, like people in Mexico that I get to keep in touch with through the internet. I was in Mexico City, and a woman DM me. She's like, hey, you're in Mexico City. I live here and I really enjoy following you on Twitter. Do you want to come to a party? Like, that's sick. Like, that shit is sick.
So awesome. That is awesome.
And I continue to be friends with those people, like not just in a digital sense, but we talk on FaceTime, like, how you doing during COVID, and but yeah, I think we need to do a better job of helping young people navigate the internet. We need to help all people understand that too much of a potentially good thing can become a bad thing.
And if someone is, you talk about watching a fight, looking from the outside in, from a 3D point of view. Now you can tell all yourself all the things you need to do change. Do you think too you need that assistance from, another party, a third eye in a sense? And would you recommend that? Has that helped you as well, talking to people, therapy, et cetera, et cetera?
Big time. I mean, look at Diego Sanchez. He walks out with like no corner anymore. Like, that's not going to help you win your fights. It's like, cool, bro. I respect you. I respect that. That's a warrior.
Gotta love the intensity, when he comes out.
Gotta love the intensity, man. Fucking Nightmare Sanchez walking out there like, I don't have no one in my back. It's just me, son. But you know what? Like, you'd probably do better fighting with a corner. And it's the same as just existing, man. I've seen psychologists off and on since I was 24. Like, I think I was 24 or 25 when I first went to therapy. I was having a bit of a rough go, and shout out my mother, like, she was like, what's going on? And I was like, man, I just hurt all the time. Like, I really did hurt all the time. And all the training and all the hard work that I was putting in, yeah, that kept me on the straight and narrow, and I'm really stoked with that, but it didn't take my hurt away. And I started seeing like therapists and shit, and I've continued to see different therapists over my lifetime, man, and they've all allowed me to be in the space where I am happier more often than not, and they allow me to be a functional member of society, and they allow me to be in a relationship that's healthy, and I know how to navigate. And I think all people could do with that. It makes me frustrated that therapy is so inaccessible economically for people. You can go to your GP. If you're watching this, don't get me wrong, like, help is out there. You can go to your GP and get prescription to therapy, but the wait list can be long. But there are centers like 1737 that you can call, Lifeline. You can call Rainbow Youth. Outline in Auckland is for the GLBTI community. Like, there are different services out there, and I think I just really want people to understand that there's no shame in getting that help. I say this all the time. We see personal trainers for our bodies, dietitians for our bodies. We have coaches to help us with our skills. Why would we not see a psychologist or a therapist or a spiritual healer or a sound healer or whatever to help us with our emotional and spiritual and mental distress?
I think you make a really good point, and I'm glad you plugged those lines and advices, because I think people need to be a bit more open. I remember I told someone I'd just been going to therapy, and they looked at me in a funny way, and I felt a little bit embarrassed. But then later on, they opened up to me about some things. So I think when you're open and you let things out,
yeah,
it lifts a weight off your shoulders. And I guess that's what you're doing every single day you wake up, right? You're helping people lift a weight off their shoulders. You're motivating them. You're helping them be more vulnerable, be stronger people.
Yeah, that's the idea, bro. Again, it all started organically. I started talking about mental health maybe 2013, 14. The bro Mike King, who's one of the pioneering voices of talking about mental health openly and honestly and vulnerably in our country, invited me to be a host on his radio show. A guest on his radio show to talk about my shit, right? And then I'd been doing radio for a long time, like over 10 years at the end. And he's like, would you host the show when I can't host the show? So I started doing the show called the Nutters Club.
Nutters Club, yes.
There's always a psychologist or a therapist in the room with us. And we'd have these talkback conversations and interview guests. And it really let me know that, there is there is healing to be found in the truth of vulnerability and vulnerable sharing. And when people talk about things and we help each other find things as a community, then we help one another stay alive another day, you know, and that's awesome. And then I was going through my own shit, and this is where the positive social media came. I was like this painful, horrible sharer. Like I have very bad insomnia when my mental health's not good, even when I'm stressed today. And I would just be on fucking Instagram pouring my heart out. Like, I look back at it and I'm like, oh, this is so cringe. It's so embarrassing. And I've done that a few times when my mental health's been shit and I've put the wrong thing on the internet. Sometimes it's too much and I wish I'd never done it. But also some of it was really honest and just me hurting publicly. And people actually connected to it.
Exactly.
And it helped them out, man. And they're like, and then they asked me questions about what I was doing to get better. And I just tell them, I'm like, look, I'm not a therapist or psychologist, but this is what I do. And this is what the evidence is. If you look at the data, it might help you. And I'll just continue to do that to this day.
Well, that's inspiring. What can we look out for next? I know you've got a big event in a month's time. I think I saw tickets actually just come up out at the event centre in November. Is that an event coming out for you soon? You're a guest speaker.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've got a few things coming up. Well, actually tonight, I don't know, what's the date today? Today is the 20th of October. Tonight is a start of this 2-part documentary series on TV1 called Man Enough. And I was part of that show. They came and interviewed me at my gym, and then I facilitated a workshop of volunteers, young men talking about masculinity and how we learn about it. So that's on TV1 at 8:30 tonight, being Tuesday, and next week as well. I really encourage you to check that out and be part of that conversation. A bro called Matt Chisholm fronted that show, and he was really struggling with his own mental health. Head up TVNZ, Movember got involved to fund the show and its production. It's sick, man. They have a lot of great people in it. Really proud to be part of that. I'm speaking at Monty Beetham's Steps to Life 10th birthday alongside the bro Dave Latelli, Brown Butterbean, and Tai Tupo from the Key to Life Charitable Trust. Really proud to be speaking with those brothers about my journey in my mahi. And I have a few different speaking events at schools coming up. And yeah, I've got to find a new gym because my space has been.
Well, I was going to ask where can, because I know you were with you're right in the Central City, right? Was it the
Yes,
Centos?
I was at Dos Manos with my brother Amin Afsali, running my class out of there. But I've moved around. You know, I was a couple of days at Ludus Magnus. I was a couple of days at my brother Tony Angelo's gym, City Liga. At the moment, I've had my own gym since January. Well, like I've subleased the space, but inner city Auckland property's been developed. We got to move out, so I'm in the hunt for a new space. But for now, I'm at I'm just here. You can send me a message if you're interested. Yeah, in the CB or like City Fringe. What else? Yeah, that's the main stuff. I'm doing my
Where,
master's degree. I'm writing my degree in sociology right now. I'm fucking way behind, but that informs my practice. So it's not just my over caffeinated self yelling at people. I'm like, no, this is what really smart people said. This is the research, dog. So I keep busy with all that shit, bro. And yeah, I don't know.
and your
Long way
website
to
and
do.
your Insta, like, do you want to throw that out there, your social handles, so people can follow you, reach out to
Oh
you,
yeah, for sure.
see your
Thanks, man.
stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, man. If you have any questions, you can always email me. hello@richiehardcore.com. Richiehardcore.com is my website, which is periodically out of date, but it's not too bad right now. I'm on Twitter, Insta, Facebook, all at Richie Hardcore.
Perfect. And anything we didn't discuss, or you wanted to say to any of the young sort of rangatahi or anyone watching out there today, as a final shout out or words of
Well,
support?
thank you to you, Isaac, for having me as a guest on your show. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you using your platform to give me a voice and have these conversations. And if you're out there and you're watching this and you're struggling, I just really want you to know that it gets better. You know, like I've had some real low points in my life, and I have felt really lost and suicidal and distressed for a long period of time. But my life is flourishing again. We go through mental health is a journey like our physical health, and sometimes we languish, and sometimes we flourish. And if you're down here right now and you're watching this, you won't be here forever, and help is out there. Please ask for help. If you're watching this and you know someone is struggling, offer help. There's nothing wrong with checking in with your friends. Don't just be a fair weather friend. someone's hurting, they probably need just an open-minded conversation with someone who loves them, and that can make all the difference. So, yeah, be brave, use your voice, offer help, ask for help. We can all be we can all make things better.
Inspiring. We loved having you on here today. Thank you so much for your inspiring words, and we look forward to following your journey, Richie Hardcore.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.